Hi, and welcome to MDRG's Ask Me Anything. This is the CPG and Beverage edition. Thanks so much to everyone that submitted questions. I think we're going to get to all of them today, and we have a lot of great information for you here. So first, I want to introduce our experts, Brad and Amy. Brad is highly educated, highly motivated. He leads our quantitative team and has years of experience on the client side. Before joining MDRG in 2022, he worked market research roles at Land's End and Joann Stores. Brad, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And Amy is our resident sensory expert, as well as the leader of our qualitative team. She worked with Little Caesars and the Boston Beer Company, so she really gets CPG. She really gets people and how to ask insightful questions to understand consumers and their motivations better. And Amy, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
And then I'm your moderator, Mary Rose Walker. I am the brand strategist at MDRG. I work with both teams, which makes me a perfect person to sit here and ask these two questions. Quick note about our company. MDRG is a custom market research firm, meaning we take your business's needs into consideration and custom design every project depending on your objectives. We just hit our 30th anniversary last year, and we're proudly a woman-owned business based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. We work really hard to make sure our research delves into the whole mind, both the conscious and the non-conscious consumer motivations, to deliver data-driven insights that stick. So we wanted to put together this AMA to help our CPG and beverage friends who maybe aren't as familiar with market research have an opportunity to ask some questions, get some answers about what the process looks like, what its benefits are to your brand, and how you can move forward. So with that, let's dive into the first question. We know that consumers are accelerating purchases of higher ticket items in anticipation of tariff-driven inflation. How do you think this consumption behavior and economic macro trend will impact lower ticket, fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG brands? And for those that aren't familiar, FMCG brands are products that sell quickly at relatively low cost. So they have a shorter shelf life because of high consumer demand, like soda, confections, or because they're perishable meat, dairy products, baked goods. Amy, since this is a little closer to your background, why don't we start off with you?
Great. I think it's an excellent economic question. And I'll preface with saying I'm not an economist, but I'm happy to answer from a research perspective. For many of the FMCG brands, the impacts tend to be a little bit more nuanced. We see three consumer responses typically. Some are trade down to private labels so that they can maintain their volumes and purchasing frequencies. Others are maintaining brand loyalty but purchasing less often. And there's a third group that often becomes more promotion sensitive. But the mix really varies tremendously by category. I think what's critical is understanding which behavior pattern dominates in your category, and that's really well accomplished through targeted research. For example, in certain categories like RTD cocktails or functional beverages, consumers seem to be surprisingly resistant to trading down despite any economic pressures. So if you're seeing this kind of a trend in your category, I'd recommend some quick pulse research to determine which of these behaviors your specific consumers are exhibiting and help inform your pricing and promotion strategies during these times of economic uncertainty.
Awesome, Amy. Thank you. Our next question is, how can smaller brands with limited budgets conduct meaningful market research? And Brad, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Mary Rose. This is a perfect question. I worked for some very small research teams in the past, and we did have limited budgets. So there are a few tips and tricks, what we used, how to maximize our reach. Thinking about this, first, it's really working with your research supplier or vendor and being clear about what your budget is. And being really, really willing to work with them and really help them tailor your best solution. Additionally, you want to start off with knowing exactly what you need, and you want to stay in scope with what you originally agreed upon to reduce costs. You don't really want to start with a broad idea and then continue to build upon that, because that's going to increase costs for you. So kind of go in there with, knowing exactly what the research objective is. And if you don't know exactly, it's fine to discuss with the vendor or supplier. That's really why we're here to help you out. Additionally, a lot of the times that I've seen costs kind of get out of hand is by the sample or who we're talking to. So what you could do, and I wouldn't really rely on this too much, but if you do have a customer database, you can contact those individuals and reach out that way. That's one way to save money, depending on really who you want to talk to. If it's not a general audience, your customer database may suffice. So that's one option. And then lastly, always have the discussion with whoever you're working with on how you can tailor the output of the research. So you can sometimes save money by only asking for a top line report or no presentation or just the data only. And again, really focusing on who you want to talk to and who that audience is.
Thank you. Great answer. Our next question is, market research can seem expensive. We get this. How can companies effectively balance the cost of market research with the need for actionable insights? And either of you go ahead and jump in and let me know what you think here.
I can take this one. Research budgets are constantly under pressure, right? And the need for consumer insights doesn't go away. So my advice, first off, is be ruthlessly clear about what the research needs to do. If you can't specifically identify the impact, reconsider your research questions. Keep working those until you get to something where you know this is going to answer specific questions that you have within your organization. The next thing you can do is consider flexible methodologies. Maybe not every question gets the same depth of investigation. Sometimes a quick pulse survey on flavor preferences will give you 80% of what you need at 20% of the cost of a large comprehensive study. Another thing I see all the time is, I'll call it maximize what you already have. Use your resources. It's amazing sometimes how much clients have really valuable data that they haven't fully mined. And so before consigning new research, consider auditing through your existing information, sales data, customer feedback, previous studies. There's a lot that you probably already know that can help you avoid duplicating efforts and spending more. I guess I'd also be remiss as a qual researcher if I didn't say don't underestimate the power of well-designed qualitative studies. There are strategic qualitative methods that can uncover the why to drive meaningful action, but not cost you an arm and a leg. With one particular beverage client, we actually saved them from an expensive large-scale study just by identifying some critical positioning issues through a handful of in-depth interviews. Research spend is a balancing act for sure, but focusing on the impact and beginning with what you're trying to accomplish will really serve you well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. Our next question is, internal stakeholders often have conflicting views of what they want to get out of market research. This can put insight managers in a really tough position. What are some strategies to help make product research valuable for many internal stakeholders? And this is a great question and a really common issue that we have. Amy, what experience do you have with this?
Yeah, I mean, it almost goes back in some ways to the previous question. But for me, in my restaurant product development days, it really started with understanding my stakeholders and taking time to consider what's going to be important to them. For example, marketing is going to need consumer language and positioning insights, but R&D is looking for prototype validation or sensory data, and sales needs to know how to sell the product, so they're looking for competitive and market insights. A lot of those things can be integrated into the same study and can give your research more bang for the buck. Starting with an understanding of what insights are going to be the most helpful for your internal customers is going to help you and your partners craft a methodology that's going to deliver powerful insights to multiple groups. Spend time thinking about not just the business questions you have, but the application of your results to set yourself up for the best success. I love it when our clients can bring us perspectives and needs from their internal stakeholders to the early stages of a research project. It's that old adage, begin with the end in mind, right? It holds true. And what your teams need to know when they need to know it is going to be super helpful to set yourself and any of your partners up for the best success and help you over deliver internally and make everyone shine. Understanding and communicating things that you know up front are going to help set you up and help address any potential limitations, or even help you navigate challenging conversations if one of the stakeholders' important perspectives just can't be included.
Yeah, great. It's really clear from that answer that you've had a lot of experience with this too. Great. Our next question, the sheer volume of ideas we can research and test can be overwhelming. How do we determine which objectives are the strongest and are aligned with the company's strategy? And Brad, you and your team are fantastic at helping tease out these objectives in your studies. I've seen this firsthand many times. What do you think about this?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mary Rose. And Amy, I love your response on the last question. I thought it was spot on. So really looking at this, it's crucial to have strong objectives whenever you're determining what type of research you want to do. Early in my career, I've seen a lot of times where research would fall flat because objectives just weren't too clear. Some teams would come to us and say, "Oh, we just want to know about the customer." Well, what about the customer do you want to know? What are the details we want to know? Learn from this research. And really, whenever it comes down to it, detail is key. You don't really want to have a single study that tries to learn everything about your product or your customer. You want to have a detailed focus whenever you're talking to customers or potential customers. This will really help align the research to provide better information for you in the long run, and it'll be easier on the respondent to have that conversation to be specific about XYZ. So really focus on those key details. Additionally, at the outset, it's really important to have a clear understanding of not only what you're going to be asking, but how are you going to use the results? For example, you want to conduct research so you can show senior leadership why there's an opportunity to target a specific type of user through conducting a market sizing exercise. Or you want to understand which flavors are appealing to help your product team really understand what products or what flavors they should move forward with. And really knowing how you're going to use this research and these results will allow you to really better align with your company's goals. Thinking about this, if you can't imagine how you're going to be using the research at the end of the day, then maybe this project isn't really top priority for you. On the other hand, if you can easily understand how you're going to implement action from the findings or the potential findings, then that's the project that you want to move forward with.
Yeah, great advice. This next question is definitely a question for both of you. Qualitative and quantitative research can feel so different. What's the best way to combine them?
Yes, I love this question. I, even early on in my career, I was always thinking about adding qualitative work into our quantitative work. I think it adds so much flavor and depth into the research. It really builds upon showcasing both sides of the consumer. And Amy and I have done this dozens, if not more times, really combining our research together and bringing out the best in both sides of quantitative and qualitative work. I think it's a good way to really understand the what and the why, really bringing on those questions that quantitative research may bring. At the end of it, really understanding. I might need to learn a little bit more from the findings that I found out from this project, and qualitative research might allow me to get there to really understand why people are in this project or purchasing this item. And then additionally, qualitative work really allows us to, understand those topics before we get into the quantitative work. Really understanding like some vague topics, right? And, getting a hypothesis around those topics before we dig into a broader audience.
I think you're spot on, Brad. Bringing together the depth of qual and the breadth of quant really helps confirm findings and understand those whys. I can't tell you how many times I've done different quant studies in my past, and they love a product or they hate a product, and the first thing your senior leadership says is, well, why? Well, we don't know because it wasn't part of the study. So I love when we can bring the expertise for both qual and quant together and really give our clients the most holistic view of things. The best research that we can deliver for our clients often takes this approach. And the other thing is there's ways to achieve both qual and quant that can fit into many budget options, especially with today's technology advancements and AI tools. There's all sorts of ways we can integrate qual components into a larger quant study and not break the bank. And that's a lot of fun as well.
Yes, it is. Okay, this is another great question. And Brad, I know I've seen your team tackle this. So what about when different methodologies bring in contradictory or confusing results? What are some of the best practices for interpreting conflicting data points?
Yeah, I see this quite often, especially in the case of Net Promoter Score or NPS. Many times it comes down to when the data was collected, who was answering the question, and really maybe even the length of the survey. For instance, as I'm talking about NPS, if NPS is taken directly after a purchasing experience, they leave the store, receive a survey, and they answer the Net Promoter Score question. It can be drastically different from those that answer the same question several weeks or months after the experience. So really knowing that time frame of when the research was conducted and how it was conducted can help alleviate some of those contradictory issues. So really diving into that. I think additionally, looking at who we are talking to, who is part of the study helps with that as well. In many cases, looking at the differences between age, gender, geography, income level, that might skew results. So we might, in one study, we might be talking to a much younger group than in the other study. And those younger individuals may have different preferences than the older individuals. So that's where conflicting issues can lie. And also, even looking at how the question was asked, sometimes you might be trying to get to one answer, trying to track it one way, and then it contradicts just because the way the question was worded, or even the scale that was used in terms of is it a 5-point scale saying most likely to very unlikely? How is that impacting the results? And one case that I want to bring up to really showcase this is recently we had a client who historically they've been collecting 2 data sources for brand tracking and healthcare research, and we were brought in as a consulting partner to really kind of guide them into how they should be looking at this data. The client really wasn't a research focused individual. She was focused more on brand strategy. So we were the research minds that came into it. And really the question was, we have very similar questions in study A and study B, but we're seeing different results. And what we did was we looked at the data and really started noticing, we need to cut this data so this sample is identical or at least as close as possible to one another. And after we did that, we easily saw that the data was the same. It was just a different type of person or different type of consumer we were talking to in the original study.
Awesome. Great example as well. All right. Well, we hope you got a lot out of part one. If you want to hear more from us, our insights, other things we think are interesting in the CPG and beverage industry, go ahead and scan this QR code to sign up for our quarterly CPG email list. Thanks so much for watching part one, and we will have part two coming up shortly with the second half of our questions. Have a great day.